having these communities of like-minded people that share values, it's priceless.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Framework Leadership, a podcast about principles and ideas you can use today to take your leadership to the next level. I'm your host, Kent Ingle, president of Southeastern University.
And I'm your co-host, Michael Steiner, vice president for innovation.
And now for our amazing guest for this exclusive episode of Framework Leadership is TJ Visiodei. TJ is the founder and CEO of Axe Decentralized Real Estate, heavily involved in the homestead movement and visiting our campus to speak with our amazing students about this topic. And we're actually joined by another special guest, our very own SU Provost and Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Megan Griffin, who's actually teaching a course on modern homesteading movements. Great to have you both with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Look forward to this conversation for quite a while. This is just an incredible topic. So I want to start our conversation by talking about homestead farming. For our listeners who don't know, TJ, what distinguishes, when you talk about this, homestead farming from conventional farming practices in terms of sustainability and self-sufficiency?
Almost everything. Almost everything. I mean, we're flipping so many different paradigms and so many different dynamics. It's hard to begin. The amount of the amount of hate that we get from the traditional farmer it's a lot. Why? Because we use practices that don't involve fertilizers, that can get more animals on the land than most people would ever even imagine, right? Mm-hmm. Most people, they think of a cow per acre maybe, and we're talking about like, hey, no, you can get way more than that. Mm-hmm. We're talking about direct to consumer as opposed to selling to a feedlot, which we'll go into the economics of that, but suffice it to say, so much of your money goes into paying everybody but the farmer.
Right.
Wow.
And we're empowering families who are otherwise city slickers to be able to create their own food, create their own systems. And lastly, we're doing it in a way that empowers the least empowered people, like the actual ranch hands. And that's a whole thing I could get into, but to suffice it to say, you look at any civilization across history, and the people who are the least paid are who? Like, they are literally the ones who are growing the food itself. And so we have a system that makes life so much easier for these families that want to move out of the city into their own homestead, 10 acres more, that want to provide abundance for the family, provide freedom for the family, provide a simple framework for the family to live around other people who share the right values that are espoused here at SCU, right? Values that are shared here, and values that make a society not just go from, okay, this is just another society, to this is part of God's kingdom. This is part of what actually God intended for people and for his children throughout the world. So there's so much to go into.
And what's insane to me about this is this idea of ownership, which, like, when you go back to all of our founding documents, and Dr. Griffin and I could geek out in about 100 different ways, but like the foundation of our country is this idea that you can own things. And in modern society, it's so crazy how little you actually do own. And now we're putting that back into people's hands. Comment on how you're doing that. Give us a little bit more practicality. What does this look like?
You just said something so important to really help people understand this shift, this problem that we're solving and everything going on. All right. Suffice it to say, there are entire economic leaders, like if we look at the World Economic Forum, that outright tell you to your face, you will own nothing and you'll be happy about it. Right. And there is a natural shift that there's people who hear that and they are not okay with that. And all those people are looking for somewhere else. I put that number at about 15 million. Okay, give or take. We can't get the exact number because what are we going to do? Sit down with every single one of them? Yeah. But more or less, I see it as a 15 million family shift that wants to move out of the city into their own homestead. Yep. If every single one of those families was to replace their suburban home with what we're advocating over here, that would be an $11.5 trillion shift. Okay, this is a big problem to solve. Okay, and we have very elegant solutions for those families who refuse to own nothing and be happy about it, who will do anything for their families to own something, and they will not be happy about it until they do.
Right.
So, ultimately, when we get down to it, we're going out, we're getting the absolute best land throughout the country, the land that is being only bought up by private equity
Yeah.
funds, major elites, and major foreign interests. Okay, we're the only company that's actually going out acquiring these lands and making them available to families who want to create a legacy for themselves and expand God's kingdom.
It's epic. And what's crazy is, especially when you get into regenerative agriculture, and I hope you sound off on it in a second, is one of the arguments that you hear, right, is how antithetical farming and those practices are to things like caring for the environment, caring for the controlling. But it's like when you realize that it's all the same answer for economy, for the environment, for social, it's the same answer across the board. It's nuts.
I have a perfect example for people who just don't get it, right? So like I mentioned, I was like, yeah, look, like we got we get so much hate from farmers, right? Rotational grazing, how does it actually work, right? Well, if you go out in nature, you look at bison, you look at cows, you look at any of these animals, what are they living in? They're living in herds.
Yep.
What are the herds doing? They're migrating. They have a migration pattern. And they're being chased behind by what? By some wolves or some other type of canid or some type of other predator. And they know to move around. That is what they're supposed to be doing. What they're not supposed to be doing, okay, you'll never find in nature, is that they're sitting around in their poop.
Right.
They're not going to
Right,
be
yeah,
doing that. They're
yeah.
not going to be sitting around
Yep.
all day doing absolutely nothing, having super fat muscles. They're not going to be doing that.
Right.
Right? So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, no, animals actually have a migration pattern.
Right.
Instead of using, instead of them doing it out in the wild, we're mimicking that pattern by having them move through what we call food forests, which are really just a recreation of regular forests, with border collies and Kangals that we've literally bred, and using a very simple system that allows them to move from one paddock to the next and allows the grass to continue growing upwards in a way that doesn't require fertilizers. Because you want to have that conversation about agriculture and impact on the environment. Okay, that conversation has to talk about the amount of fertilizers we're using, or the fact that, any one of these crops that we're growing, these monocrops, right? You have to kill so many animals to have that monocrop. And then because you kill the animals, you have no biodiversity. You have no biodiversity. You have to add in this other stuff. That stuff seeps into the water. The water seeps out into the public, creates hormonal issues, creates behavioral issues, creates cancers, while also ruining that environment for everybody. Everybody loses in that other system.
Yeah. Right.
That is the enemy's system versus there is an original way that from the very beginning is what we were meant for, right? To take dominion, take care of the animals, take care of the environment, okay? And in naturally moving around these animals, taking care of them, we can actually increase the soil fertility. We can actually take out a lot of those chemicals. We'll buy land that's been, we'll try to not get stuff that has monocrops. But if we did get stuff that has monocrops, we'll be able to heal those soils. We'll be able to replenish those soils with bacteria and other forms of microbes and mycorrhizal fields that help replenish everything. So for a person who wants to help the world and help the environment, this is the ultimate way.
Well, and the stat that I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that if every single farm in America transitioned to rotational grazing, they could refix all the carbon that's been released in the nitrogen since the beginning of the industrial era in 1 year.
It's
In 1 year. Wow.
In 1 year.
That's crazy. I actually did not hear about that. I did not hear about that.
That was
That's
the,
wild.
that's
Are you
the stat.
serious?
Yeah, I don't know for sure. It's a stat I heard.
Dude, that is
look at
incredible.
others, but it's something insane like that. That's how good cows are for fixing nitrogen into the system.
Or
Carbon. Sorry.
I totally believe it. And there's multiple reasons for part of why that is. Like, number one, it's just so good for the grasses. It's so good for the soils. Like, for anybody listening in, to understand what we're talking about here, okay? When you do rotational grazing, let's say I got 10 acres of land, right? You're gonna have some living space. So let's call it let's say it's your land, okay? Yeah. Dude, you're not gonna put, if I give you 3 acres, okay, you're not gonna really fill up more than 3 acres for living space. Right. I could put a 3-hole golf course on 3 acres of land.
Right.
I really could.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got another 7 acres, right? So now I've got my another 7 acres. You split it up and you rotate the cows. And here's the key: every day, or maybe even twice a day. And we have ranch hands to help you do that. Okay. What's going to happen is the cows, they're going to do their thing. They're going to eat some of the grass, and they're going to, they're going to go to the bathroom, right? They're going to have a little bit of, some cow pies, right? What you then do is you actually have animals, and this is what happens in nature. animals will come in. The cow pie, what's going to happen if you have a cow pie in the sun? Just naturally, there's going to be bugs, right? So you have other animals that come in that are scavengers that will eat through those little cow pies and eat up those little bugs, right? In this case, it's chickens. We mimic that with chickens.
Yeah.
So now we've been able to feed the cows and we've been able to feed the chickens. The chickens get their natural feed from the insects. This is very good for their guts. This is very good for them to get all their proteins that they need. We don't need to add antibiotics to the chickens. We don't need none of the steroid chickens. These are good, healthy, fat chickens.
Orange yolk chickens.
These are
orange yolk chickens.
These are good chickens. Okay. And now that you have that, now the chickens, they're also going to go to the bathroom. This is a very good natural fertilizer. Okay. For those who don't know this, okay, chicken scratch is very, very good. You can literally collect it and throw it onto your plants. So now you have this natural fertilizer from these chickens, and the grasses start growing. And what you want to look for is that the grasses hit this perfect little sweet spot, right? Where it's not too young, because if you eat it too young, the grass dies, right? You eat it out the root. If it's too old, it doesn't have the best nutritional value because it's old. You can wait for it about like between 8 to 14 days to hit that sweet spot. And now you bring the cows in. The cows are excited. They know naturally, oh, this is like the
good
most,
stuff.
Yeah, this is the best stuff. So they will. You don't need. A lot of people think to have cows, I need to be a cowboy. I need to be Yellowstone. I need to have the horses.
Right.
You don't need none of the horses. You don't need any of the cowboys.
But we can, though.
You can, right? I mean, I got the.
We can dress the part.
You can, but the main idea though is that like you don't need that stuff because when you see it with your own eyes, the cows literally start hooping and hollering and moving over all of their own volition. You don't even need to do anything because they know it's 4 o'clock. It's feeding time, boys. So it's so good for everybody involved.
Love that. And Megan, you're actually teaching a course on modern homestead. Tell us a little bit about it.
What
What's
I was
going to
say is what I hope you heard in all of that was the biblical wisdom that's already in nature.
Right, yeah.
And that's what the course is really about. We offer at the end of our foundational core a worldview and complex problems course, and we have it on all kinds of topics. So I just happen to be teaching the modern homesteading version. And it's basically saying there's a movement happening. You can look at it from any discipline, from any angle. Everyone who has a divine design in them, something that they're wired to do, something they're gifted to do, take that problem, our food system, our economic system, and apply what you're gifted for with biblical wisdom to that topic. And you just heard TJ do that. Like there is biblical wisdom, there's God's design, and even today, our students on the first day of that class, on the first day of that class, they met him and they met his colleague Clay from Genesis Homesteads. And I'm thinking, where do we go from here in that class? Because they just heard vision for the future.
Sure.
That's amazing. And so what we want students doing in that class is thinking about from the point of view of God's design, from the point of view of, the self-concept. I am a person who has a divine design. I have gifts to bring to a problem.
Right.
I look at TJ and he's somebody who clearly is gifted, clearly has a calling, clearly has vision, and he's built a team. This is a leadership podcast. He's a person who has assembled a team around him that is, developing all of these entrepreneurial systems around him. And, I want students to see that because this is how real world problems are solved. And biblical wisdom is at the heart of that. That's what our worldview and complex problems course is for. And we're doing that in the modern homesteading course. And so it's super fun to have students right at the center of a movement like this and to have a front row seat. I couldn't get them away from students. They want to know, how can I intern? How do I get in the ranch hands programs? How do I buy in? Like they just want to jump in, and I'm not at all surprised.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, TJ, I want to transition our conversation a little bit and start talking about your company, Axe. Which essentially helps families who have no experience with farming make the transition from really a kind of a suburban life to one with acreage and a profitable homesteading farming operation. So tell us a little bit about your company, the inspiration behind it, how you're helping these families across the country.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take it a little bit back, and I'll give you kind of like the story behind how I even started it. So, because there's different inflection points to how we created Axe, right? So the first inflection point was back when I was in university, and I was obsessed with just learning about psychology, everything like that. I had a degree in behavioral biology over at Johns Hopkins, and I was a junior, and we were tasked with writing a paper about any topic of our choice. It was like the term paper. It was like, this is like the whole, the next the next semester is going to be focused on this thing. I wrote about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it was supposed to only be 5 pages. It turned into a 65-page.
Oh my God.
Wow.
By the way, professors love students like that. Love them.
We do.
Like, I went deep into it, and I'll sum it up. But the main idea is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs basically states that your mind has a subconscious problem-solving mechanism that operates off of fundamental and dire needs. If you want to motivate someone, you find a need that they might have that they haven't been able to solve, and you have their subconscious part start working on that, right? That at the lowest level, you've got physiological needs, but then you have security needs, which is really just a long-term version of physiological needs, right? And in our society, we just use the term money, right? Then you have relationship needs. Like, I want to make sure that I have I have my wife, right? That's why, God looked at Adam. By the way, I just want to note, God creates the world. Everything is good, 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 good. The first time he ever says something is not good is Adam being alone there. That's just, it's just really noteworthy. So, then you have relationship needs, esteem needs, and then self-actualization needs. Now, if you open up most textbooks, right, and sorry, because maybe even y'all's textbook might even say, like every textbook does this, they will stop at self-actualization needs. But there was actually a whole nother need that Maslow would talk about, which is transcendence needs. And he actually said, look, this is actually the most important one because it's how we create civilization itself. Like literally, this is what at the root of Christianity is. This is the root of what's important in life.
Right.
To struggle needlessly for all this other stuff, is pointless if you don't have the ability to move closer towards the God. It's a need for God. Literally, what he's saying is, this is the scientific way of saying there is a need for God. So I wrote a whole paper about that, and I did very well. But for 10 years, I thought to myself, like, how do I actualize this? How do I do this? Fast forward a little bit more, I decided to not go to medical school after taking the MCAT and getting a perfect score and getting recruited by some of the best medical colleges in the universe, in the world, and instead entering into entrepreneurship. I had a marketing company where I would help out different business owners, and I did very well with it because I could help other business owners. I turned 20 of them into millionaires. So I'm living in a mansion, in a gated community on the water, as nice as it gets. Like, this is like an MTV Cribs nice mansion. I'm thinking, I'm only 27 years old. This is a great place for my daughter. I can't wait to have this. I'm good. There's nothing that I could really. I remember even commenting to my wife, like, there's not really much we can do from here. Like, we just kind of chill. Well, life kind of punched me in the face the moment my daughter was born, because it was a home birth in our bed. And that very night, while my wife was recovering, we had the worst winter storm in Texas history. We were not prepared for it at all. Okay. My so-called super nice gated community, they went crazy really fast. Okay. Like the HO, you had the HOA president, like, for when someone has a birth, okay, that's a very sacred time period, okay, for the recovery and stuff like that. Yeah. The HOA president basically like barging into our home when we're in the middle of that recovery. We had no heat, no water, no electricity, no food.
Yeah.
I had no guns, no protection. I couldn't really trade away the skills. And then, have the HOA president coming in, trying to like walk through the house to be able to check through stuff. I'm like, please get out of here, dude. He's like, oh, the pipes, but I don't need none of that. And I felt humiliated because I was sitting there, and the only way I could provide heat for my family was burning the gift wrapping paper that we'd had from the baby shower. And I was crying. I was having one of those really, really bad cries where, you have snot and everything like that. And I was like, never again. So I thought about that paper that I'd written. I was just like, dude, I thought I'd provided everything for my family, but I'm not a provider. I don't actually know how to do that. I am good at making money to try to do that, but I don't know how to actually provide food, actually provide heat, actually provide water, electricity, etc. for my family. So I was like, okay, at the very least, we'll go and we'll just buy one. We'll just buy a turnkey homestead. And I looked and looked and looked. And, You can't find something on Zillow. You go to places that they'll advertise as if they actually make it available, and it's not actually available. It's a complete and total sham in terms of what it actually is. For example, AgriHoods, they'll say, "Oh, AgriHoods, the next future." They'll argue as if they're the future of homesteading, but it's just a normal ticky-tacky suburban development with 2 acres on the side that have, they're really actually just, areas that are undevelopable that they were like, let's just throw a farm on there, right? So I was like, okay, let me just, let me see. I went to survivalrealty.com and there was just no inventory in Texas. And I realized maybe I just have to do this myself. So I took all that money that I was going to spend for my own house, okay? And I invested all of that into my education to learn about land development, learn about farming, learn about construction, recruit my mentors, recruit my advisors. And over time, what I learned after spending about $150,000 doing just that, just focusing on that, was I realized that the problem has different spheres. Like you have land development is one problem. You have farming as a second problem. Even if you know how to farm, you have farm marketing and sales as a third problem. Then you have the actual infrastructure for the whole community as a fourth problem. And fifth, you have the construction of the homes in rural areas as a fifth problem.
And if that's not an example of what we're trying to do as a university in terms of training students to take all of those spheres, those different domains that everyone is gifted to do, and then to gather and solve problems together as Christians. If Christians don't solve those problems, nobody will.
Right.
Around a biblical worldview. And so when I hear Acts and the Acts kind of collection of organizations speaking to each one of those domains, I see world change. I see challenging every system that we have. And I see, dreams that I recognize as God-birthed dreams with teams built around them.
Right.
And that's the stuff we do. And so we just had to have TJ on campus. We had to do a course around it.
Absolutely.
I have a yes and to what you just said about it's like if Christians don't solve these problems. This is exactly what's going on. I just mentioned we have the land development problem, all these ones, right? The truth is they've all been solved in their own separate sphere,
Right.
but by people who don't care.
Right.
Right.
They're not. They don't see it as. They don't literally take it seriously as like, hey, this is part of like God's will to make this available.
Right.
This is actually important that I provide these food. That I solve this food issue, this sales issue, all these different things. They don't care. So if it's not Christians who are stepping up and doing it, who is?
Right.
And that's what we've been dealing with this whole time.
Right.
Who is?
And for what purpose? So
Exactly.
Right.
normally you buy food and money moves from a family into some corporation. But in the model that's being built here, money moves from a family to a family.
Yeah.
And through the franchising system and through the distribution system and through the whole model.
Right.
We have money moving from families to families. And that's a whole different way of thinking about food production and consumption and commerce.
Well, and that's the thing. It's hard to wrap your head around if you haven't been thinking about this. But so the way our country works, right? The way the system works is communities working together, sharing what I own with my neighbor, working together. And so much of that through globalism and different things like that, and I started popping off on this, we've outsourced so many of those functions together that now you live in a situation where I buy my food from a grocery store and never talk to my neighbor.
Yep.
Right.
And so moving back to the reason, a lot of the problems that we have as a country is because we're operating in a system that's different than the foundation. The Constitution was set up for one thing, and we're living in a whole different type of system there.
You mentioned earlier about, the founding principles of this nation. We were supposed to be a nation of decentralized farmers.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
Like, I'm actually centralized real estate. Oh, this is so new. And it is so new. And at the same time, like, this is what we were supposed to do the whole time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. I mean, you can go through every single amendment, and when you understand it, and when you read like the Federalist Papers, and you see that their whole point, I'll take it. One example is the Second Amendment. The whole point, like there were some farmers that literally said that some of the founders said that we didn't need an army because every single person was supposed to defend their own property. That only makes sense if you own what you're going for. And so this coming back to that sense of ownership that actually creates connection with my neighbor. Now we're mutually dependent on each other, not outsourcing it to some company that's got that's across the globe and is just moving, things around in kind of some shadow network. So
Procter Gamble, PepsiCo,
Kellogg, 4 different corporations that are really one because they all own 50% stakes in each other.
Exactly.
It's nuts. Sorry.
Yeah, so awesome. Now, building a sense of community is a key aspect of ACT's mission. There's no doubt about that. Talk to us about the importance of relationships and what role that has played in your personal journey in the development of your company.
There's 2 levels of it. So I'm looking at it as like a designer of the communities, and then there's like just personally. So the reason we're called Acts is because it's specifically a reference to the book of Acts in the Bible, specifically Acts chapter 2, where you had 3,000 people on the day of the Pentecost that they gave their life to Jesus Christ. And then they started going out and they started working in unison, breaking bread and giving more and expanding God's kingdom. Right? And then, by the way, the next chapter is one of the next things they do is they go out and get land. And the guy who stood in the way of getting land, he got killed immediately because he was, land is that important. So I say that because having these communities of like-minded people that share values, it's priceless. Why have I, and I don't mean this in a bragging way, like why have I put out a message for $0 and had 240,000 people respond to that message? And why is it, we had a woman in Tennessee, a woman in California buy land in Tennessee with us. When, by the way, this woman is not like, she's not like balling. She's not got so much money that she could just do that willy-nilly. She literally was like, because I know the community of people that I'm buying into. It's priceless. It's everything. Right? We could even argue, we can even talk about the church. It says, for wherever 2 or 3 of you gather, there I am. Right? That's what's important, having those people and having those relationships. How many people barely interact with their neighbors? If they do interact with their neighbors in their suburb, it's only to talk about some stupid rule breaking or some gossip within the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Try to grow some tomatoes and see what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Try to let your grass grow a little bit and put a cow on there, see what happens. Right? Having relationships with neighbors that you can trust is massive, especially in this new future where everything is taken over by artificial intelligence and everything is talking to an automated sales machine and there's no cashier at the front desk. There's nobody to actually. It's going to be the absolute premium above all other things that exist. Now, that's community design. When we look at interpersonally, for anybody listening to this, when we're talking about leadership, if you don't have a good network, you're dead in the water. I don't care how good your ideas are. And I know that as the CEO of a company that is, we're going to be huge. We're the next unicorn company. We're that thing. And I don't mean that conceited. It's just actually, it's going to be huge. Sure. And we will be stuck, right? We'll have moments where we're stuck, and be like, why? And the answer every time is 2 things. Number 1, making sure to give glory unto God.
Right.
And number 2, trading away bad relationship for good relationship, right? We'll raise, so I remember when I started this, because I didn't know who to talk to and stuff like that. When I started this, I would go out and there was a property, it was an unbelievable good deal. It was $840,000 for 400 acres of land. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Right.
Are you kidding me? That's a great deal. And I couldn't talk to anybody about like, hey, let's do this deal. That's if you don't have relationships. You have good relationships. We have no problem. Let's go out. Let's get this, $15 million property. Let's raise $100 million. Let's raise $300 million. Right? If you and now I have a network. I'm building those relationships of Christian investors, people who want to invest in the kingdom and divest or divest from the prison system that exists, right? The enemy's prison system, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's really what we're talking about here at the end of the day. The enemy's prison system, and invest in God's kingdom that is actually forming. You need to have those relationships.
And haven't you found that the Lord brings them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not like oh, well, let me just join this, I'll just join this little club or let's just do that. Because that's the way, the enemy works up to this point. I'm not even going to get into it, but that's how it's worked up to this point. People in their own little clubs based off of exclusion versus, what it will be is exactly as you say, it'll be, wow, it will feel like this timing is impeccable.
Right.
This is the perfect person to reach out. This is exactly what we needed.
Right.
The people. I wish people could have been there in the conversations I was having just yesterday with the entrepreneurs I was talking to. It was unbelievable. I was literally commenting. I was like, "These are this is it.
Right.
This is it. These are God's people." And at the same time, notice how I just used that word "unbelievable." Right?
Yeah.
I've been slowly training myself. It's just hard because it's a habit to not use that word anymore. Oh, it's unbelievable. It's crazy. I can't. Who could have thought this is possible? Because you know what? That's actually supposed to be normal.
Yeah.
That's what God
Right.
wants.
We were talking
Exactly.
about that the other
Yeah.
day, even here at SEU. I was talking with another person here. It's like the miraculous happens so fast that it's almost like it's not even surprising anymore.
Right,
Because
right.
a miracle happened today, and then later today, and then also tomorrow, and it's like you're exactly right. You just have to get used to that being the norm, because
Yeah.
that's how
Yeah.
God works.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: How can individuals overcome self-doubt and develop the confidence to pursue their dreams, and especially those with unconventional paths?
So, in creating this project, as I said, all right, you've got these 5 major problems, and every single one of them seems like an intractable problem.
Sure.
Meaning that there's 5 different directions from which, in building up this project, you have people that'll be like, "Who dare you to ever say any of this stuff?" Right? When I started, I got laughed out of rooms with land developers who'd be like, you've never done land. You've never even done 10 acres. You're talking about 500 acres, 1,000 acres. Who are you to say something like that, right?
Yeah.
Or with farmers. Oh, did you grow up in farm? My family's owned a farm for 4 generations, right? Who are you to be able to say something like that? How dare you say something like that? But you know what? There's 2 things about it. Number one, there's confidence in being able to reject certain agendas for what you're supposed to do, right? And there's confidence in, like, you know what? I'm going to listen to God more than these other people. And I know that I'm putting in the work, and that this calling for me right now, there's a flow that's happening right now that I know for a fact this is the right place for me to be in. It's just door after door after door. And I'm going to ignore all of these other naysayers and bad influences that are going to try to do it. But then the other thing about it is that, we were talking about the faith versus works thing, right? That you're saved by your faith, not by your works, right? But the way I see it is, you're saved by your faith, not your works. The works do help demonstrate the faith, though, right? And when a person is putting in that effort, kind of like, you're doing the studies, you're doing the reading, you're doing the necessary things, then there gets a point where it's like, dude, especially because I know that God's on my side on this, I'm definitely going to be able to create that result. One kind of small example of that is this, right? With regards to that question on confidence. Like, Steph Curry is incredibly confident when he takes a 3-pointer. That man will shoot up a 3, and he will walk away. He'll turn around and walk down the court, if you watch him, as the ball is falling down. Right? That's how good he is.
Exactly.
But why can he do that? Well, it's because when you watch his masterclass, he says that he does a minimum 100 3-pointers a day.
Right.
And he won't leave until he's done 25 of those 3-pointers in a row. And he says that by doing it exactly 100, he can measure whether or not it's like, oh, well, today was 86 and the last week it was 86, 87, 88. I'm good. Right? And he says that, in fact, he even knows that when he's in practice, he hits, he does 95 to 96 out of 100 3-pointers a day. And he says, if I get to that 95, 96, I know that in game, that's going to be an 87 or 88.
Wow.
Right?
Yep.
So now, okay, can you do that, but in business?
Right.
Can you do that in whatever your endeavor is, right? So, for example, for sales, right, or for us getting stuff up and running, look, I know the principles that go into any one of our marketing things, and I know, hey, we've done this plenty of times. We know this. We know what works. We've been able to develop it. We've worked. We've done all this other stuff, and we have a consistent track record that we can go to. So I can be confident on, for example, like, we're going to sell X property whatever the property might be, because I can be like, okay, I know that I can consistently get 200 to 400,000 viewers on this video every single time. I mean, 200 to 400,000. This property only has 40 parcels on it. So out of 400,000 people, I only need 40 people. Of course, I'm gonna be confident when it's numbers like that, right? How can you put in that work in alignment with what God intended? The original Greek word is dilemma, with God's dilemma, okay? And know for a fact that you've been able to make it so that this system is inevitable. The result is inevitable, and you have the right people supporting you. If you have that, then that confidence turns simply into knowledge, and that's how you proceed forward, and that's why you can speak so well on a thing.
Wow.
Epic.
Yeah, I love
Epic.
it.
Before we close out and head to our fire round, what's next for you guys at Axe? What's coming? Where are you going for? You've covered so many different things, but what are you guys trying to hope and accomplish
We're
next?
so excited. So, in our first 6 months, starting on June 22nd, we had announced our Texas property, right? We had closed it on like June 21st, and then, we got it out. And now, less than 6 months later, we already have 4 properties, right? Totaling 2,668 acres for about 200 property owners. And we're already almost sold out entirely. So it's like the last 10 parcels for our Florida property. This next year, we want to expand from 4 properties to 15 properties. And these properties are super massive. Where the first ones were from 500 to 1,000 acres, these next ones are, if I just read it out, 3,000 acres in Montana, 5,000 acres in Wyoming with...
Guys, I saw pictures.
Yeah.
Just
No,
get out
Wyoming,
your checkbook, because they are gorgeous.
Yeah, they're insane. These are they're ridiculous. There's we're looking at land in Hawaii. There is Southern California in Santa Barbara. There's Northern California in Monterey County. There's properties in Idaho. We're looking at New Hampshire for land. There's also the beginnings at the end of the year of our international push. I showed to everybody. Some of the kids were like, oh, because I showed a literal island that we're looking at purchasing.
Wow.
Expansion out there into Europe. I was looking at New Zealand as possible
I
expansion.
told him, I said, you need a university partner that can scale with you, man. I mean,
But actually though,
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible.
Love it.
Well, we're going to move into that fire round, ask you a couple of questions that surround everything we've kind of discussed, and just grab some of that, practical application piece for our listeners. So just 3 quick questions. Michael, you can start.
Love it. So I guess first question is, somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, oh my gosh, this is me. And maybe it's somebody sitting around the table right now. What is the advice you give? How do they take that first step? Where do they go to kind of start this journey?
Go to our Instagram at ActsDreal, ActsDereal. Watch the videos on that Instagram. Then go to the link in our description. Go to actsdereal.com, ActsDereal.com, and watch the FAQs. Whosoever is listening to this with their little doubting mind and their, it sounds good. It sounds too good to be true. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
Okay, go watch the FAQs. I think I'm the only CEO that I know of for a company like this that has sat down and written out and physically filmed 135 question FAQ series with videos, with transcriptions, answering. I answer questions as silly as like, how do you get mail if you're off grid?
Yeah.
What do you do for trash? How does rotational grazing work? Literally I go through every single thing. And my challenge for families is we don't have salespeople. There's not someone to talk to. And we did that because this is entirely your decision. Watch the videos, and based off of what we're saying for 135 of the most pressing questions, you can figure out if this is right for you or not. From there, once a person joins, then people can sit down with us, and we have a full-time life coach solely there. You don't pay them. Like literally it's free when you join. They are there just to coach you through like, okay, you're moving off grid. What's going to happen with your job? Let's talk through what you're going to do. What's going to be your transition? What's going on with your marriage? Let's make sure that your marriage is doing good. Okay, your kids, they're in high school. What age? Like, let's make sure that this is coordinated so that they're in the right position as we do this. Do we want to do it in 3 years? Okay, here's a 3-year game plan. Oh, you want to do it in 6 months? Let's do it in 6 months. 100% free to work with them. We also have an online course called The Road to Ranchizing. right? Where we literally sit there and we have stuff on here's how to start your own home church. Here's how to run a homeschool with someone who's actually been in homeschooling experience. Here's how to set up your own trust in order to place your land into your trust and be able to pass that down to your children so you don't have any issues with that. Here's economic principles. Here's business principles so you can acquire your own businesses and be sovereign. Here's how the grazing works. Here's how the agriculture works. Here's how food forests work. All of these things included when people pay their parcel reservation fee. And then once you paid your parcel reservation fee, you choose your parcel. It's a lot like the NFL draft, but for land, right? We go one by one, like, hey, like, it's time for you to choose, and, you just choose your land. And from there, you get started with us. The franchising really easy. You don't have to pay for a ranch hand. The first 6 months is actually paid for already. It's already included in the franchising costs. And after those first 6 months, they are set up to make their own income. So you're doing a profit split with them, and they're literally incentivized to make you as much money as possible because they'll make as much money as possible, right? They share and help out about 6 different families, and they get 1/6 from every one of those families. So it ends up working out so that they're making as much as the average of all the families that they're helping out.
I'd just add, it's not my fire round, but this came from a low moment, burning wrapping paper in the middle of sometimes that calling comes in those moments. And young leaders and students, you don't always know what that is. And sometimes it hits in those deep, dark moments. But look what came. Look what God delivered. I mean, it's something that's not just for you, TJ, but for so many families. 200 already and growing exponentially.
All of this stuff I talk about, I want to make so clear. I'm a dummy, all right? Like
perfect MCAT. Not convinced.
That's hard to.
There's an element where, like, when I was growing up, if I what I wanted to do when I was a kid was I always knew at the heart of hearts I was like I want to solve world problems and I want to be a leader. That's even why I'd even entered in. It was when I realized I could solve even bigger problems than that stuff. That's when I moved forward. So I was asking for that the whole time. But going back to it, it's like all of this is all on rental. Okay, this is all owned by him, by God,
okay.
And all my ideas come from him. Because I mean, half this, I will literally say something, and I'll even literally be like, "That's what? Like that's wild!" Like I remember the day we came up franchise, the day that came out, that concept, like that was, we were both literally as surprised the moment that happened. That was a literal godsend, pure godsend.
Yeah. One final question, and we'll have this as a final round question. How can people truly stay true to their divine design when leading an organization? Stay true to really how God wired them, created them, as they lead something like this.
I have a parable. And so one of the parables, it's so if you look at the journeys of Paul, there was this one, he was going to go off to this one place. The name escapes me, but the point is he was getting on a ship and he told them, he was like, "Look, guys, like, I really don't think we should do this right now. This is just not a good idea." And I'm getting messages like, we shouldn't do this right now. And they did it. And they got into a terrible storm, and it was awful. And it was only by God's grace that, any of them even survived at all. Right? And so I say that because it's like you can really look at the results of your life to be able to tell you, hey, where are you going? Right? Where are things going? Doors will start opening in unbelievable ways. Look, there's that word again, unbelievable. Doors will start opening in ways you could have never previously imagined when you're truly in alignment with things. Doesn't mean you're not going to have challenges. You are going to have challenges, of course, okay? Yeah. But when you follow that, there's this energy, there's this momentum that you have to take advantage of. And everybody can feel this momentum, okay? In the same way that, you can look at electromagnetism. It will feel like being pulled by a magnet. All of a sudden, you say something, and like the very next day, you'll find the exact solution that you were looking for that thing, or the exact right person. But what it requires is an element of courage. If there's no risk there involved, if there's no real sacrifice there involved, if there's no real reliance on God and demonstration that, hey, like I know that this path is the only if it's not big enough and it's not clear enough that the only way that you're going to do that thing is through God, then that thing might not work out. So if you already can figure it out, it's a done, easy deal.
Right,
You
yeah.
already
No,
like,
that's good.
and it's nice and strategic. I got my little spreadsheet for it. It's like, no. Like, look at how Jesus would send out the disciples, right? He'd literally say, like, look, like literally the clothes on your back, that's it. Like, just go out there. Why? Because that's what begets this thing.
Yeah.
And it depends what language people want to use. Right? Whether they want to call it that, it's, I saw a great thing. Someone said, scientists will try to call it quantum mechanics, right? You'll have these like people who are interested in like this witchcraft stuff, and they'll be like, it's spells and stuff like that. And there's all sorts of nonsense. But the reality of it is that when it really works for a person who is in alignment with God, like that is God's will coming out through you. That is the Holy Spirit coming out through you. And the difference between that and regular everyday being held down life is it's palpable. And so you have to pay attention to that.
Powerful. Well, TJ, Megan, thanks for joining us in this conversation today. Powerful conversation. We're grateful for your insight. And to learn more about Acts Decentralized Real Estate, again, you can go to ActsDReal, which is ActsDereal.com. To connect with TJ, you can follow him on Instagram at TJ Visiodei and LinkedIn at TJ Reeves. To learn more about the Modern Homesteading Movement course and other courses offered here at SCU, go to scu.edu. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Framework Leadership. If you're watching on YouTube right now would be a great time to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you can get more leadership content right into your YouTube feed. You can also check us out on Instagram at Kent_Ingle, at Dr. Michael Steiner, or on Twitter and YouTube at Kent Ingle. And hey, if you love great email newsletters, and I know that I do, you want to check out the Framework Leadership newsletter. Every single Friday drops in great tips to be a better leader, resources, thoughts right into your inbox. Check it out. You can sign up at kentingle.com. Make sure you hop onto there. Thank you so much for listening to Framework Leadership.
Take care, everybody.